Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the local review body of the 1st of February 2023. I can confirm that this meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting? Thank you.
Happy to appoint Councillor Driver if he's willing to take it on.
I am. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the local review body. This meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council website for public listening. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Write and speak in the Teams chat functions when you want to contribute. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. And the usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Move on item 2, which is said and apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Claire, can you provide the said and apologies, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. We've got 2 apologies this morning from Councillors Hill and Marshall. Councillor Dashper is currently not present. In the council hall, we have Councillor Ian Carruthers, and on Teams, we've got yourself, Councillors Blake and Howie.
Thanks, Claire, and I confirm my agreement to the participation of those members recorded as participating remotely. Item 3 is any declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make?
Chair, it's Ian Carruthers in the council buildings. My only declaration of interest is that the first application, I think it was for Moorhouse, I was approached as per what we normally as a local councillor in regards to this application, when it was an application, not the local review, and they were seeking guidance in regards to procedure. That's as far as it goes, so more than fine to stay within the meeting, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. You can't see anybody else, so Claire, can you now take us through the local review body through the documents and the papers for the meeting? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 2 notices of review for consideration at this meeting. The first being item 4, Moorhouse Annan Road, East Riggs, refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house 2185 full. In your papers you have the notice of review, report and handling, observations of the appointed officer, the planning application form submitted on the 23rd of October. I should perhaps note that the replacement pages were issued for the planning application form that was originally included in the hard copy papers. All members have received a correct version and the papers have been corrected online. Also, you've got the decision letter, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Local Development Plan 2, and photos of application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are that located to the rear of the existing shop and cafe, the proposed development would have no frontage onto Annan Road and as such would constitute backland development which would fail to accord or relate well to the established character or pattern of development in the locality contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2 Policy OP2 and the associated supplementary guidance. And 2, the proposed development would have an adverse impact on residential amenity contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policy OP1A due to the potential material loss of privacy to adjoining residents as a result of overlooking. The question method of determination, the applicant has asked that review be dealt with on the assessment of the review papers only with no further procedure. The submission of the applicant's agent included an amended location and block plan which was not in front of the appointed officer when the planning application was determined on 22nd of September 2022, the applicant's agent has been advised that the review of this case can only consider the submitted plans as they stood on 22nd of September 2022, but it remained open to the client to make a fresh planning application in respect of any revised proposal if that was their intention. Grounds stated in the notice of review: in summary, do not believe that the grounds for refusal are acceptable. It's not backland development, and there are plenty of other examples of houses that have been built that sit back from the main road street scene in the local area. The family have lived and worked in the area their whole lives and simply want to build an affordable home for their family. The land has been in family ownership for many years. The house will be built to current building regulation standards, so will be of a high quality. There's nothing currently available in the market that suits a family that's affordable. The siting also benefits the proposers that it's beside another family member's house. And the proposed house encourages self-build and a diverse local housing stock. They are building the house for themselves, and a high quality will be strived for in all areas of the build. Development plan policies are listed in your papers, being LDP2, OP1, OP2, H1, IN9, IN10, and they have the supplementary guidance, design quality and placemaking. The main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policy OP2 and the guidance set out in adopted LPP2 supplementary guidance in relation to the fit of the proposal with the established character or pattern of development in the locality? Further, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policy OP1 Part A in respect of its impact on established residential amenity standards by reason of overlooking? And if it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? And if members are minded not to uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached to vary? And if members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? So having it in the documents within the papers, it falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that there will be no representations from any party heard today. You have the following options. Decide you have sufficient information to determine the review today. Request further information in the form of written representations. The LRB would be required to state precisely the information it was seeking and who would provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would not obviously allow a decision to be made today. If the LRB resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the LRB has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. You have a planning advisor present at a meeting in relation to this case. It's confirmed that he has not had any involvement in this case prior to the submission of the notice of review, and it's not the case officer or the appointed officer for the application. Here, purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process to the local review body. You also have a solicitor present here today and will act independently if the LRB require any specific advice on matters of law. So if members are clear, no further clarification is required. I'll ask the Chair now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead the LRB through the agenda papers together to decide if you have sufficient information before you to make the determination today.
Thanks, Claire. And before we sort of go to the photographs of the area, because I'd like to take the photographs of the area before we decide whether I've got sufficient information or not. Who's the planning officer that we have with us today?
Thanks, Chair. I'll be acting as independent planning advisor today. Okay, thank you.
Right, members, I think if we go through this one, if we see the photographs first, then we'll go through the different pages and then we'll see where we go from there. So, Mr. Duncan, if you want just to take us through the photographs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to do so. But before I start in the presentation, just one error to note within the papers. On page 25 of your papers, you have an extract of an email between the agent and the case officer. It's just to be clear, I'm not sure why that's got mixed up in the case, possibly because on page 35 you see an email relating to 2 cases, which later seems to become one in page 25. But for the avoidance of doubt, the email on page 25 relates to a completely different case, so it has no bearing in relation to what you're considering today as part of your review. So moving on to the presentation now, the first slide is looking at the application site. It's a view looking east along Annan Road. You can see the site on the left-hand side here, just beyond that house with the coins on the left. I should point out I haven't visited the application site myself, but obviously the case officer has when she's determined the case. Moving on to the next slide, this is a view looking towards the access of the proposed house. You can see Moore House on the left-hand side there, and the application site itself is also on the left-hand side, but it's beyond the former shop, the previous shop that you can see there, and Moore House, which is the property with the dormers. So moving on to the next slide, this is a view looking west along Annan Road, so you can see the cottage on the left-hand side there. Moving on to the next slide. This is a view looking east along Annan Road, so you can see Victoria Gardens in the background. You've got Moore House on the left-hand side, which is the large property with the dormer windows. And the next slide is just showing the closer relationship. So you've got the access to the site, which is shared with Moore House on the right-hand side there as well. You've got the former shop on the left-hand side there. And the next slide, this is actually within the site, so it's looking north across the application site from the site entrance. So it gives you an idea of how it relates to the other buildings surrounding it in terms of positioning and so on. Now, the submitted plans for comparison purposes are on pages 63 to 69 of your papers. So moving on to the next slide, it's a view of the building bounding the application site to the east. So you can see there's quite a close relationship there. Now, when I look at the plan here, probably the most useful one to look at is the one that's on page 63. So that's the combined location plan and the block plan. So for the avoidance of doubt, you can see the red line of the application site and you can see a rectangle with an X in it. That's the building you're looking at from this position here. On the right-hand side of that plan as you look at it. So moving on to the next slide, that's the same as the previous one. So moving on now, again that's the same slide as the previous one, as is this one. Okay, so those are the pictures that I have for you today. You'll also find the pictures themselves are within the papers too, because obviously something's gone wrong with the presentation there. Let me just check. So if you look on pages 94 to 95 of your papers as you have them, slide 8 should have been the view looking south across the application site, including the unauthorised caravan, which is mentioned in the delegated report. So that's on page 94 of your papers. So if we go back to slide 7, slide 7's correct. Slides 8, 9 and 10 aren't showing the same as they were in the papers. So at the bottom of page 94 you've got slide 8 there. So that's looking south across the application site, including the unauthorised caravan. Then you've got slide 9, which is looking southwest towards the garden and the rear of Muir House Cottage. And then you've got slide 10, which is looking west across the application site. So apologies for the technical error, but that gives you all of the images that were meant to be in the presentation, and I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. If I go to the index of context for members for points of clarification, we've got the notice of review and related documents, page 15 to 26. Are there any points of clarification required? Okay, if we go to then the report on handling and related correspondence, pages 29 to 46, any points of clarification required? We then have the observations of the appointed officer on the applicant agent notice of review, pages 49 to 51. Any points of clarification required? We then have the planning application form submitted on the 23rd of October 2021, and this is the email that was sent from Claire with the updated forum. Any points of clarification required? We then have the decision letter, pages 73, 77. Any points of clarification required? Then have the relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 and the photographs of the application site and locality plan there. So the first question I'm going to ask is, do we have sufficient information before it is able to determine the review of today? I think we have, with the information that we've got on these particular papers and the photographs, albeit there's 3 missing in the paper itself. So we're happy to determine the review today.
Yeah, happy to proceed, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just ask to go back to one photograph, a quick question on that? I think I'm absolutely fine minded with yourself, but can I come back to the photograph which outlines it's the access in particular, and I'll come back to that point later when we get into session. I think Robert's finding it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. You ask the question.
Thanks, Chair. So actually, we'll refer back to the page number first when Robert's finding that. I think he's putting it up on screen for us, which is obviously 294 115. Give me a wee second. Chair, it's the... Oh, that's it. Spot on. Ideal. I hadn't seen it. So I'm just looking... I want to make sure that's the... Because there's probably a conflict within I suppose the red boundary line which is presented to us and what's looking there in regards to, because it looks like a confined site. It's not absolutely obvious where the access is. I take it that'll either be, and again I'll come back to this in session, but that is the proposed access is what we're looking at there, and I'll come back to the further detail. Judge, want to make sure that is the case, what we're looking at.
Robert, can you confirm that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the picture that Councillor Carruthers refers to is on page 93 in the papers, and it shows the access to the site shared with Moorhouse, which is the large property on the right-hand side with the dormer windows. If you look at the plans on page 63 of your papers, particularly the block plan on the right-hand side of that plan on page 63, you can see there's an annotation there. It's in quite small writing, but it says existing shared access drive, and then you've got the red line block sitting behind that. So it's outlined in blue, so it's in the same ownership as the application site, but it's not actually forming part of the application site as such. But that shows the intended relationship. So that comes out at the front of the site where you see the annotation for 18.6 metres on the road. That's where it's joining Annan Road. And then you've got a shared driveway which would access the site. So that's the intention insofar as vehicle access to the site.
Thank you. Ian, you got a point?
No, that's fine, Chair. I'll come back to it. Just it is at 4.9 within the report 32. It's the roads officials' response to that, but I'll come back to that in session. So, no, that's clear for me. I'm comfortable with going forward today, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Ian Blake.
Yeah, I'm quite happy going forward with that too. But it's just to clarify, is that entrance just now? It's a proposed access to the site if the house was to be built. Is that the access to the house to the site just now?
Yes, it's the access to Moorhouse that you've seen in the picture. So it presently serves as an access, but it's only serving Moorhouse at the moment.
It doesn't serve the site just now.
Well, the site's garden ground at present, so the access is serving Moorhouse as well, and the garden ground, as I understand, it's associated with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, remember, so we've we've agreed that we've got enough information to determine the review today. So I'll open up to members to review and conclude. Ian, I think you wanted to come back in when we were in session.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to start this off then. So let me get my glasses on. So in regards to the notes that I've took, so page 31, paragraph 4.3, I think is where I've started, which I have. So we've got 5 bullet points here. And my understanding is of them 5 bullet points, which are the key considerations in the assessment of the application are principal development. I think it goes on to say that actually it could be acceptable or may be acceptable. It being, I think, referred to the submission, it's either brownfield or whiteland or whatever it may be, but certainly within the settlement of East Riggs. Compatibility with the surrounding area, I've got a question mark over that. It's further detail, but I think it's okay there. It's particularly around about point 3, the site design impact of the surrounding properties. Or is it? No, it's probably between the two. I've got a question mark over both of them. I think the access and servicing seems to be okay, and sustainability seems to be okay as the case officers outlined within the report. So I'll probably come back to those 2 points where it isn't. Okay, I'll go back to 4.9 on page 32, Chair. And that was where my question was, because the roads obviously says, however, as a result of the proposal to utilise the existing driveway and parking area, serving Moorhouse as a shared driveway, a new parking area would be required to be provided for Moorhouse, but no such detail has been supplied. I'll just make sure I'm close enough to this mic as well, Chair, because I know we're having problems. So my thoughts, Chair, in particular, so we've seen the picture. I just want to make sure that was the access. We haven't got I don't think on plan, and I think when I've looked at the plan itself, it shows in red and shows in blue the ownership. Beyond that, so in red it just shows it's almost like a concealed site. You wonder where the access is, so we've got clarity in regards to that. So I think that was one point, so it'd be a shared access, but then again I think it's in at Moorhouse, which I know from being a local member, you'll know yourself, Councillor Driver, but further along there's a full access to the other side of the house, which I think they do use for access, but it goes more into a yard rather than, because I think it's like an agricultural holding at the back of there. So they use that access here for commercial vehicles, but I think there is potentially other options. So the compatibility, so it talks about the reasons for refusal. In particular, it's a backland, for what I can see. Now I know again, I did wonder, but probably not. I did wonder if we did any. So within the support statement, as mentioned, within the response as well from an officer in regards to the fairness, I suppose, of the actual report we've got in front of us, what was applied for. There's a number, I think there's 3 or 4 different places that are in reasonably close proximity that would reflect a pattern of backland development. I think there's an argument to say it wasn't actually backland development because it was constructed in a different way historically. But I think when I was looking at it, as best as I could, for what I think was the case, was the houses being referred to. I'm not 100% sure. I had a quick look at Google Maps. It looks, on the face of it, like it's backland development. It's very, very close to this area. So I think there's a reasonable argument to put forward that actually there is, historically in this area, backland development. I think it's been evidenced within the report. It may well not have been constructed in that way, but in actual facts, when you're looking at it, it's the same pattern of development. So maybe a couple of points there, Chair, in regards to, probably for Robert, the background. Do we have any photographs in regards to the sites that have been referred to by the applicant, by their representative, their architect? So I think it's 3 or 4. Can we see them to see what the actual part of development looks like? Does it look like backland? And really, it's come back to the history, how they got there, and actually saying backland development or not. It looks like it, but actually the way it's constructed, does that make a difference? It wouldn't have in my eyes, because the pattern is there. Thank you, Chair.
Robert, do you want to clarify them points?
Thanks, Chair. You're obviously reliant on the information you have in front of you today. that's been submitted by the applicant, and you've got the appointed officer comments. Otherwise, it's a review of the case as it was submitted when it was determined by the appointed officer under powers delegated to them. If you wanted to have additional pictures of the sites that are mentioned, which aren't in the papers at the moment, you could request further process and serve a procedure notice asking that. If you wanted to go out and look at it on site, obviously it's within your gift to issue a procedure notice asking for a site visit as well. But in answer to the question, no, there aren't pictures of the sites that are mentioned by the applicant in their statement. It's just a review of the case as it stood at the time, and the pictures were provided by the appointed officer primarily of the application site and the surroundings. So my advice, Chair, is that information isn't there, but if you would like that information or you wanted to conduct a site visit, then it's entirely within your gift to do so.
Thanks, Robert. Ian, do you want to come back on it?
Please, Chair, thank you. So we're maybe past the point of site visit, but I'll see what other members think as well, Chair. I mean, you're fairly local to that area as well, let's face it. So I'm only going back into my memory what's there. Haven't actually seen in detail, haven't went back and had a look, haven't had the time, or I probably would have to save this conversation today. But I just wanted to be absolutely clear in regards to that. I've looked Google Maps, I'm not 100% sure, but for me, close proximity to that area, there is what looks like the pattern of backland development, Chair. So extra photographs would be good, but I think we've probably ruled the site visit out. Thank you.
Thanks. Ian Blake?
Sorry, nothing more from me, thanks.
Sorry, it was just your hand was up, Ian, sorry. But I think for me, I mean, I was looking at this in a way, in particular, in Annan, Ian, and you'll be aware of these things up on the old Windermere Road, and as you come back down to Prestonfield Road, that some of the houses are up a shared driveway in the back. However, what I think the distinction between this one and those ones is that this is actually going on to a B road or an A road, if I remember right, the Annan to Gretna Road, basically, and that's the concern I would have with this particular one. I don't think there's any requirement to go to a site visit, because I think we're aware of that. Certainly, you and I are aware of where it actually is. I'll just check that there's something in. Ian, Heavy, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Chair. No, it's just I'm comparatively new to planning. Maybe Robert can help me out with the backland development criteria, as opposed to a house that's merely set back from the frontage. So it's just if Robert could give me some clarity on that, that would be appreciated.
Robert?
Thanks, Chair. When I'm speaking just now, it's just my view as a professional planning officer, so I'm not using any official definition or definition within LDP2 or so on. But the best way to describe it is probably, if you look at looking at the plan on page 63, which is the location plan and the block plan, the backland area in very basic terms and planning terms is the land to the back of a property. So what you have to do is try and interpret the predominant building pattern of an area. So when I'm looking at this, if someone asked me if this was backland development, in my view as a professional planner, I would say yes. And the reasoning is, particularly when you look at the right-hand side of page 63, you've got 3 properties there. They don't have a continuous frontage, they're detached properties. One of them's a shop in between 2 houses, and we've seen the pictures of those. They all face onto Annan Road. So there is a kind of continuity there, a similarity of pattern. They're broadly rectangular houses, they front onto the road. So you have that area in behind those houses, which originally would have been garden area. There's no frontage abutting that part of the site either in terms of a public road or a street or something like that. There's no streetscape there. So that's the backland area of those dwelling houses, if you like, to the rear of them. And that, if you're proposing development within it, it's considered to be backland development. Now, that's not necessarily a reason for refusal in itself, but when you turn to the decision notice on pages 73 to 77, you can see that the reasoning of the appointed officer is mainly in terms of conflict with the character and pattern of the area. I'm just going to quote it here. Their view was it would constitute backland development which would fail to accord with or relate well to the established character or pattern of development in the locality, and then considered that to be contrary to LDP2 policy OP2. So it wasn't just enough that it was backland development, it also failed to accord with or relate well to the established character or pattern of the development. Now that's the view of the appointed officer. It's one of the reasons for refusal. But certainly in answer to the question, when I look at that as a professional planner, yes, I would say that was backland development. The other part of the decision is a judgment call. You've obviously got to judge, does that relate well to the established character or pattern of development in the locality? And that's what reason one's about, essentially.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. That helps. It's just so I think it's immaterial the distance from the roadway to where the house is actually located. That makes absolutely no, that's immaterial. It's purely that it's built behind another building. As such. Yeah. Grant, thank you.
Yeah, I seen Robert nodding his head there, so yeah, that's fine. Ian Blake, you've got your hand up. I don't know if you want to speak.
Actually, it's actually showing that my hand's down here, and give me the option to raise it.
All right, it's
I'll try again. Hang on.
Right. So that's it now, Ian. It's down now.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. So member Ian Carruthers, have you got an alternative to the officer's recommendation on this one?
I suppose going back to what I've said previously, Chair, I'm just kind of going through this and at page 31, 4.3, out the 5 points of reference there, there's only really 2 in question, and Robert's outlined, I've seen it on page 33 in the case officer's report, where it does say in particular that it would be constitute backland development which would fail to accord and relate well to the established character or pattern of development locality of Dumfries and Galloway Council. It goes on to talk about LDP2. I know myself, without seeing the pictures, that there is similar patterns of development in that area. The frontage, that's why I asked about the access as well. And Robert's just touched on that actually. I think if the access comes right to the front, I thought it would have had a frontage at that point, but maybe could get a bit of clarity in regards to that. But it's not shown in the plans, which is absolutely fair point. Because again, back to my point where I said it's outlined in red, the access is, so it's mentioned in a note, as Robert's alluded to earlier, but actually it doesn't actually show it coming out, so you don't see that. But we've went past that point in time. And number 2, it's potential material loss of privacy of adjoining residents. I don't know, going back to that. There is talk about affordable housing in regards to the applicant's submission, or the applicant's agent's submission. And I do think that that's whereby it's not in real terms defined within our policies, or Scottish Government's policies, but actually that is what they're using it for. Their perception is they perceive that it is affordable, and I can understand why they've done that. I've been in that situation myself, Chair, and a self-build can be because it's affordable. So it goes back to that point. So I think there is established pattern development within the locality, within East Riggs. Going back to what you've said, it may well be in Annan, but I think it's mostly got to be within the locality. There it has been established. There is actually a frontage. There's a couple of points that are probably missing in regards to me, and there's, I think in particular, maybe one more question for Robert, because we've got a superseded plan compared to what was actually proposed. And I think that's the bit that's really sitting with me, because I've not really got anything against approving this, but we've got 2 plans, I think, in real terms. I'm just kind of looking at Robert for that. I think it says we should be dismissing the second plan that was submitted after, because it was material that wasn't considered by the council's plan authority through a case officer. So maybe get that, Chair, and have a slight more thought in regards to it. But I mean, it's within the settlement boundary of East Riggs. It's been perceived as being affordable by the applicants. And there's a couple of small points that I would say haven't been ticked in regards to the 5 points that are there. I would perceive it has got a frontage, but I'll maybe get Robert's answer in regards to that and come back to you one last time, if that's okay.
Thanks, Ian. Robert, do you want to confirm some of those asks?
Thank you, Chair. There was a suggestion that the application had been changed at one point, but for the avoidance of doubt, the relevant drawing numbers are as per those listed on page 75. So those were the drawings that were in front of the appointed officer when the decision was taken. So those are the ones that you're considering today. And, you know, as I understand it, the applicant's agent was written to explain that, you know, she couldn't amend the plan and then go to the LRB. The LRB's got to consider the same case as the appointed officer did, because otherwise you're looking at something different. You're not reviewing the case. With the frontage argument, there is that existing access which serves the site, but the application site boundary doesn't extend to the frontage, so you would essentially just read it as a shared access point shared with Moore House as well. So I wouldn't really see that as a frontage for this proposal, because it's not like you've got the front elevation of the house on the frontage, it's just simply the access point. The main elevation of the house would sit behind and it would be read as a backland development. Certainly that's my view on it. Anyway, I hope that helps answer the questions, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. Ian, you got anything else to come back on?
Chair, no, thanks very much. That was an excellent answer for Robert. Chair, I would move, subject to it being confirmed as competent through yourself, Chair, but I would move if there is, so I haven't thought about this too much, but there is a proven pattern of development within that area, and this fits with that, so I feel it is acceptable, rather than that's the way I would give to it's more about local knowledge. I haven't got the information in front of us and what's been presented, and looking at our Google Maps, Chair. So I would propose that it should be approved. It's because that pattern of development is being accepted within that local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Well, I'll come to our solicitor to see if that's competent, because obviously there are other plans that have been mentioned, and there is a potential here for another planning application to come forward, which may change the response from the officer who gets that new application. But I'm going to come to our Laura. If you can give some advice here, please.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. I would suggest that if Councillor Crothers is looking to reverse the decision on the basis that there is a proven pattern of development in the area, as he touched upon himself earlier, he hasn't actually been supplied with any photographs of that from the applicant. So I would suggest that if that is going to form the basis of your decision making, then you should be utilising one of the additional procedures and ask formally for photographs of that, rather than relying on local knowledge or Google Maps. Actually ask to see evidence of it.
Ian?
Comfortable with that, Chair. Maybe it might save time. I could maybe hear what other members are thinking, Chair, because, like I say, I think it was referred to and may well be an appropriate way as a fresh application comes in. But hear what other members are thinking, Chair. Thank you. I think Laura's right in what she's saying.
Thanks, Ian. Well, my opinion would be that we go with the officer's, decision within this, because if there is another application with other photographs, then that thing will come back, regardless of what we make a decision today. So my way forward with this would be that we uphold the officer's decision. I don't know if either myself or Ian, and Ian, I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, but you would suggest that a deferral until you get the information, i.e. photographs and things like that you want to make a decision on this application.
That's what I'm thinking. Subject. I mean, I would like to hear what other members are thinking, Chair, if that was possible, because I would ditch it if I felt I wasn't getting support from that. That's what I'm really saying.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Ian Howie or Ian Blake, have you got anything to say on this?
Yeah, RJ, you've got the hassle of having 3 Ians to direct from the committee. No, I don't share your local knowledge, and as such, I would not be comfortable going against the officer's recommendation based on what I know. I would be far more comfy with another application coming forward with the additional information that we require.
So are you happy to second my suggestion that we go with the officer recommendation, the decision, sorry.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ian Blake, anything?
I tend to agree with that. I do understand Ian Carruthers' point that about the photographs, but I think it'd be far cleaner if we did just go with the recommendation and await a fresh application.
Okay, so it looks as the majority of members on the LRB today are looking to uphold the decision of the officer. And if everybody's happy with that, Claire, can you confirm the decision of the LRB?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can confirm the LRB have agreed to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the application for the same reasons as stated in the papers.
Thanks very much. We'll go on to the next application then. And Claire, if you would take us through that one.
Okay, Chair. Item 5, of land adjacent to Bailey House, Ecclefechan, refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house 21/23/18 full. You have the notice of review, report and handling, observations of the appointed officer and the applicant's agent's notice of review, planning application form, decision letter, relevant extracts from LDP2, photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are 1. The location of the proposed dwelling house to the rear of existing dwelling houses. Bailey House would fail to conform with the established character and pattern of frontage development on this part of the north side of the B7076 within the settlement of Ecclefechan and introduces an inappropriate backland development contrary to the terms of Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2, policies OP1 and OP2 and associated supplementary guidance on design quality and placemaking. 2. The proposed dwelling house and associated parking and access on the size and shape of the plot is considered to represent an overdevelopment of the site and would result in an unsatisfactory area of private garden space overlooked by existing dwelling houses and overshadowed, thus resulting in an inadequate standard of residential amenity for the proposed residents contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, policies OP1 and OP2 and associated supplementary guidance on design quality and placemaking. Requested method of determination would be an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure. Grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary. In relation to reason 1 for refusal, it is stated in the delegated report that the intended location of the proposed dwelling house would fail to conform to the established character and pattern of existing dwellings on the north side of the B7076. Generally, this is the case, however, there are also many dwellings located close to the application site which did not take this form. To the northwest of the application site and adjacent to the junction with Church Street, dwellings are generally built directly on the road frontage. As you move southeast towards the application site, 2 more modern dwellings, Armagh and Bailey House, have been erected, which breaks the pattern as they are slightly more set back from the public road with parking to the frontages. Nursery houses located between and directly behind these 2 dwellings could constitute backland development. This dwelling is situated some distance from the road frontage and at a greater distance back than that proposed in the application site. There is no real continuity in the pattern of frontage development, unlike what has been stated in the delegated report. 2. The site cannot be described as backland development as no real frontage pattern exists. Immediately to the east of the application site there is a row of dwellings which are situated perpendicularly to the public road with gable ends facing the roadway. There is no real frontage pattern in this location, more a mixture of dwellings located at different orientations. In relation to reason 2 for refusal, it stated in the delegate report that the proposed dwelling house and parking areas would represent overdevelopment of the site and would result in an unsatisfactory area of private garden space. Submitted proposed block plan includes the following values and percentage. You've got the total site area 316.17 square metres, dwelling house footprint 70.75 square metres, 23% of plot area, driveway and pass 119.71 square metres, 37% of plot area, and Garden, 125.91 square metres, 40% of plot area. The combined dwelling house and parking areas combined total only 60% of the full site, leaving 40% of garden amenity spaces. This is not overdevelopment. The garden area to the adjacent Bailey House is being calculated at 82 square metres, and the garden area to the nearby nursery house only extends to 75 square metres. Both these plots have larger total site areas than the application site. During the determination, the proofs, it was highlighted in discussions with the case officer that there were reservations regarding the proximity of the proposed dwelling house to the rear site boundary and the lack of proposed garden at this location. It was suggested by the case officer that the garden areas were generally located to the rear dwelling houses. It was contested that this was not always the case, as can be seen with the planning application 211509 Phil at Money Ive. The delegated report also states that the proposed dwelling house would be overlooked by Bailey House. Careful consideration was given to the siting of the proposed dwelling house, and it can be seen that it's been proposed purposefully offset from Bailey House at an angle of around 50 degrees. The frontage of the proposed dwelling house is located 4.4 metres behind the rear elevation of Bailey House, as the proposed dwelling house has been offset and located at such an acute angle to Bailey House. Overlooking will be minimal, and generally only gable end of the proposed dwelling house will be observed from Bailey House. The gable wall of the proposed dwelling house only contains a set of patio doors, and the privacy issues will be minimal. The site was previously used as a builder's yard and is now vacant. The site has been marketed for several years since it originally became vacant for such a purpose, but no interest has been forthcoming. Should an alternative use not be considered to be acceptable, it's anticipated that the site will remain vacant for the foreseeable future and detract from the seatscape. No objection has been received from the residents of Bailey House. Not a single objection was received upon submission of the application. A previous application was granted permission on the site for a dwelling house on 12th of May 2011, referenced 11B forward to 0006. At this time, the development was not considered to be backland development and deemed appropriate for approval. With regard to the comments about overdevelopment and the lack of amenity space, this may be advantageous to prospective occupiers of the proposed dwelling house. The proposed dwelling house is small in scale and would be attractive to elderly residents who may not necessarily require large amenity areas, which would be difficult to maintain. The site is located opposite Ecclefechan Medical Surgery, and this may be an attractive location to elderly occupiers. You have all the relevant development plan policies in your papers: OP1, OP2, OP3, H1, IN6, IN9. You have the relevant supplementary guidance being design quality and placemaking, developer contribution, sustainability, reduce carbon emissions in buildings. So, again, the main issues for the local review body to consider: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP 2 Policy 02 and the guidance set out in the adopted LDP 2 supplementary guidance in relation to the fit of the proposal with the established character or pattern of development in the locality? Further, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP 2 Policy OP1 Part A and Policy OP2 and the guidance set out in the adopted LDP 2 supplementary guidance in respect of impact on established residential amenity standards by reason of overlooking and overshadowing? Would the proposal represent an overdevelopment of the site due to an unsatisfactory area or private garden space? Would the proposal result in an inadequate standard of residential amenity for the proposed residents? And the members conclude that the proposal is contrary to the terms of LDP2. Are there any other material considerations which would justify a decision which would represent a departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, on what grounds would such a decision be made? And the members are minded not to uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal. What set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached to vary? And members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision. What changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? So having outlined the documents, that again falls to the LRB to first decide whether you have sufficient information. Again, it will confirm that there will be no representations from any party here today. The same options available to you as outlined previously for the previous item, and again you have the same planning advisor present at the site. I mean, again, it's confirmed that he has not had any involvement in this case and was not the case officer, the appointed officer for the application. Again, you have the solicitor present here to will act independently if the LRB requires any specific advice on matters of law. So again, I'll ask the chair in the first instance to take you through the agenda papers so you can decide if you have sufficient information to make the determination today.
Yes, thanks, Claire, and I think I'll do the same as the last time. I think we'll go through the photographs first, and then we'll go through the different papers to see if we've got the information required to make a decision today. So, Robert, would you be kind enough to take us through the photographs, please?
Thank you, Chair. You should see a series of 7 pictures in this presentation. They replicate the photos that you have in your papers at pages 193 to 201. So the first picture you can see, it's a view looking southwards along the B7076 with Bailey House on the left-hand side. You can just see that in the near side there, with the application site entrance just beyond the white cars on the roadside. So the application site entrance just beyond the 2 parked cars on the left-hand side that you can see. Turning to the next picture, this is a view showing the site entrance itself on the right-hand side, and that's next to Bailey House, which is property with dormer windows. The next slide, it's looking into the site. It shows the site entrance on the left-hand side. It's looking along the southeastern site boundary here. So on the right-hand side, you can see the outbuilding with the barrel roof on the neighbouring side. On the northeastern boundary, the timber fence that you can see there marks the boundary with Sunnybank, and the blockwork wall that you can see on the left-hand side in the background, that's the boundary with Nursery Cottage. Now, the original submission, the submitted plans are on pages 165 to 173. Possibly our most useful one is the site plan that appears on page 131. I certainly found it the most legible to try and make sense of the pictures and what they showed. The next slide, this is a view within the northeastern corner of the site. It's looking along the timber fence towards the blockwork wall, so that's the boundary with Nursery Cottage. And beyond the gable of Nursery House that you can see there, the white one on the left-hand side, it should be noted that this blockwork wall marks the land that had previously formed part of planning application 11P40006, which is in the delegated report as background. And that was for a larger site, but it was never implemented. Turning to the next slide. This is a view from the northeast corner of the application site. It's looking towards the rear of Bailey House, with the wallhead dormers that you can see there. The grass gravel kind of edge there where the bench is located, it shows the southeastern application site boundary itself. That's the edge of the site where you've got that change in surface from grass to gravel. The next slide is a view from the rear boundary of the application site. So this is looking back towards the site entrance. So it's almost opposite, I think, the second or the third slide that you saw, which is looking into the site. Again, that's looking towards the B7067. It's showing the side of Bailey House on the right-hand side and the timber fence that exists. And the final slide that should appear, this is a view. It's maybe not clear from this, but it's panning left from the previous image. It shows the southeastern application site boundary, again that interface between the grass and the gravel surface, indicated by the bench there, and you've got the barrel roofed out building beyond. So that gives you the context of the application site.
Thanks, Robert. Members, we'll go through the index of the context to see if you've got any points of clarification that you require. So in the first page, page 103 to 113 is a notice of review and related documents. Any points of clarification on that? Pages 117 to 148 is reporting the handling and related correspondence. Any clarification required? We then got the observation of point officers on the applicant agent's notice of review, which is pages 151 to 154. Any points of clarification on that? But the planning application form submitted on the 5th of November 2021, associated plans and supporting information, pages 157 to 173. Any points of clarification on that? Then got the decision letter from the Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 27th of July 2022, pages 177 to 181. Clarification. Relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, and then we've just seen the photographs of the application site and locality plan. So the first question is, do you think we have enough information to make a decision today on this? So I'll hand over to yourselves, members.
Happy to proceed, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Everybody else happy to proceed?
Same here.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, same for me.
Thanks, Ian. I should have said thanks, Ian, twice there. Okay. All right, members. So I'll open it up for members' discussion at the moment and see if there's anything that you want to suggest. All right. Ian Howie?
I don't have any particular concerns like I did with the last application. I appreciate the comments that have been made by the officer, but we are an increasingly elderly population. Here is a compact house with little maintenance required to go with it. And that was, as I say, I don't have the same kind of concerns regarding the sitting back from the road or the appearance from the road as with the previous application. Yeah, just observations at this time, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Any other member?
Chair, are we in session? Sorry, I missed what you said.
Yeah, I did say we were going to have we're in session, have a discussion on this. So if you want to come in, that's fine.
Thank you. Sorry, I was distracted. It certainly wasn't your fault. I was looking at a different plan going back historically to 2011. I had a quick look at that this morning. So, Chair, just put the contact. I moved to Ecclefechan back in August 2011. I grew up in Ecclefechan until I was 23 as well, so I know this area exceptionally well. I've drove by this 4 or 5, 6 times a day for the last 18 months, and it certainly looks, the photographs reflect what's there. There was a sign up for sale for about two and a half years, I think it was something like that. Quite a long time. Obviously, I go to Ecclefechan to see it for other reasons, so it was before that as well. But no, it definitely, I know it's been up for sale for a long time. That's mentioned within the report. The last place I stayed was Brykirk before I am now, and the biggest complaint on the site was the size of the gardens. From an elderly population who could afford that type of house, fair enough, but it was a big complaint, the size of the gardens amenities. So I've looked at this again and again, actually 2 or 3 times to try and get it into context. I think it's the second reason for refusal. I don't think that stands for me at all in regards to the level of amenity of the garden area. Still, associated parking, size and shape is not considered. Yep. So it comes again back to the backland development. I think it was housing in the countryside. I've been looking at beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site, but again, Ecclefechan's, it's got a large area of land allocated for housing, Chair. I think you're well aware because it used to be within your ward before the boundary change came in. And that looks like it's never got to get developed. I don't know why it's there. It's certainly since Drumbo went into liquidation. The development company that was building at the time, there's nothing happened. Well, in fact, there's a couple of houses started this year by a local person, a local company, I think it is actually. But there's only a couple, and it's so Ecclefechan's crying out for houses, as so is everywhere else, whether it's for sale or whether it's private rented. I think private rented is probably more pressure than that at the moment, Chair. But I mean, I'm comfortable to support this going forward for approval. For me, the lack of land here, that's been put forward within I think it's page 111. I've marked it. It goes through it in regards to the support statement. Reasons for refusal 2 it goes through there on the size amenities and of the amenity area, the garden area. It reflects, I mean, I suppose I've only got one question because it does refer to, and we kind of touched on this last time, a previous case at Money Ive, Robert, Chair, if you'd allow me to ask this, but I mean, like I say, I'm a supporter of this and like to come back later on at some point. So it's, when you look at it, I looked at that as well. This has also had a permission for a house on it historically, as been outlined by Robert. I looked at the plans of that, and it's not that dissimilar to what's in front of us now. So I think because of historical reasons, I already had a permission on it. I'll come back to the other reasons what I'm thinking, but the Money Ive case, I think in particular, Robert, is that, so it refers within the, I think it's the appointed officer who's looked at this to review it independently. I think they've dismissed that as being, there's no precedence, there's, and so on and so forth. But I'd just like to get your view in regards to that, because I suppose historically, the last thing we've covered this a number of times as well, we don't want to be seen as being maladministration. So it's okay for one person in the council as planning authority allows it there. It says it was in conservation, but not somewhere else. But Robert, if that's okay, Chair, just on that particular point.
Thanks, Ian. Robert, can you answer them?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The reference to the application in Money Ive is on page 141 of your papers, I think. It shows the site layout. Let me just double check that that's the case. Yes, you see it there. It's a broadly rectangular site which extends from, I think it's Drumreg and Bray, as it ascends. So this is quite a steeply sloping site. You can't tell from this because it's a site plan that you're looking at, but it shows the location of a house on this quite narrow site. It sits above the houses next to it, Stonewall and Caledon below it. I've got personal knowledge of this site as well, which helps. And you can see that the house is at the far end of this site, and you've got the access and the car parking in front of it, but this is very much end on to the road. So the road's on the right-hand side there, traversing it, and like I say, it ascends, going from bottom left to top right, if you like, in the plan. There's another point I need to make. When I mentioned the submitted plan on page 131, I actually think that's a reference to an earlier planning permission, so I think I might have inadvertently misadvised you then. The actual submission, the original submission, is on pages 157 to 173 of your papers. So when you're actually looking at the site plan here, the plan that I would advise that you should look at to best understand the proposal is the one, and I'm just scrolling down to it. You've got the location plan on page 165. You've then got the block plan, the kind of empty block plan, if you like, which doesn't show the house, on page 167. And then you've got the kind of illustrated proposal on page 169. So contrary to my earlier guidance, if you're wanting to make sense of the layout of this site, I would suggest that you look at the picture, or the plan rather, on page 169.
Does that answer your question, Ian?
It does, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Ian Howie?
Thanks, Chair. It just goes, back to my previous query about what constitutes backland development, because if you're looking at the picture of the plan on 169, if you're to look at 90 degrees from the road, the house isn't obscured by any other properties as such. I appreciate there's a 1.8 metre fence, but there's no actually physical buildings blocking vision of the house from the roadway. So again, what constitutes backland in this particular case?
Robert, can you help me?
Yes, it just really picks up on the advice I'd said previously. This location, you can see the location of the footprint of the house, and page 169 shows this quite well. It's clearly located in the rear area associated with Bailey House. So, it's a matter of interpretation, but, my view would be that forms part of the backland of Bailey House, if you like. And therefore, if you're developing the backland area of it, it's backland development as such. It's a pattern, it's positioning and pattern, essentially.
Is that clear, Ian?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk on this? I am familiar of this one, as Ian says. It used to be in my ward before the changes to the boundaries back in 2017, I think it was, and it has been on the for sale for a number of years now. I do have some I would say I do have some way of looking at this as a way forward, that particular part of Ecclefechan. If it was to go forward, it would have to be as an exception to policy, OP1 and OP2, and the reason for that is because of affordable housing for the older generation. And it would have to, the only problem I have with that is there a condition that can be placed on that? And I'm looking at Laura to see if she can give us advice on this.
Thank you, Chair. So you'd be looking for a condition to state that this property was only going to be used as affordable housing?
Yeah.
I don't think that would be competent, Chair. Our affordable housing policy is in relation to developments of 5 properties.
Yeah.
And what you're looking at is the use of the land for a house, similar to when we were considering the application for the retail developments at Planning Application Committee last week. We were saying you don't so much look at the applicant or the user, you look at what the land is being used for. What you're being asked to do is to approve the land for the use of as a residential dwelling.
Okay. I mean, I've given my feelings. Ian, have you got any? Ian Carruthers, have you got anything to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. You read my mind. I was confused to put my hand up. So again, I'm minded to yourself, and as far as going forward and approving it, to restrict it to a particular use. I think it'll naturally take that course of action or resident that you're outlining anyways, because it is close proximity to the shops. That's right in the high street. It's within a very short walk of the high street, Ecclefechan, where there's a number of stores, convenience and otherwise. You've got the doctor's surgery directly opposite, within a matter of feet, straight opposite, which is definitely be attractive to the local people, elderly people within the community. I personally think it's a derelict site that's sat for long enough. I think the beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site only applies to housing in the countryside, and maybe could get clarification in regards to that. But for me, that's the primary course. Obviously, there's a need for it within the local area. I've spoken to a couple of members of the community council who didn't give an actual opinion on it because they hadn't been consulted, they hadn't picked up on it because of the timings of the meetings and such like. But just to try and gauge what their thoughts were. Going back, there's no objections, there's no real, but I do think I would like to see it approved here. Primarily, it would tidy up this place. It would benefit our housing stock. There's no two ways about it. It is, I would imagine, for the developer, probably good for the local economy. But I don't think the constraints here are such that it would, and because it's historically, so I'm probably looking for a wee bit of guidance here. But historically, it's already had permission. You could be argued that the principle of development has already been established, but is the site and design in particular. But it's not that different. It's not 100 miles away from what was there previously. It was historically, it wasn't a local development plan, but such the plan and policy haven't changed massively either since then. So, number of considerations here. But I would maybe with a wee bit of guidance actually from a independent plan officer, Chair, and potentially Laura, if it's required in regards to what would be the best way to frame this as far as language is concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Robert, if this was to be, accepted by the LRB as a way to go forward, it would obviously have to be as an exception to policy OP1 and OP2, but there has to be reasons why we give that. And I think Ian's given some reasons there. And then the conditions of the actual overturn of the planning officer's recommendation, there's a normal set of conditions for this type of housing. Can you give us some advice on that, please?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. If you're minded to take a departure from policy, there have to be stated grounds for that decision and a list of conditions and reasons and possibly directives. So just coming back to the point that was made about this being a brownfield site, I was conscious of that. And it can, the fact that the site is brownfield in an urban area can add weight as a material consideration to your decision to depart from the development plan. That much is clear. It does, however, and I'll read this out, I prepared this in advance in case this happened. It seems clear to me here that there is a risk of contamination at this site And my advice to members would be that if they're minded to grant planning permission, they should first issue a procedure notice to continue the item to seek advice in that regard from the Council's contaminated land officer as a precaution as much as anything else. And then to ascertain whether further information would be sought from the applicant, such as a contaminated land assessment. The risk with members attaching a blind suspensive condition in relation to that is that requiring the submission of information in relation to a determining issue, which this could be if it suffers from bad contamination, it can be tantamount to the refusal of the application if the condition can't be discharged. The guidance contained within recent Circular 3 of 2022 at paragraph 4.67 is as follows. Any requirements for additional information, whether they are identified at the pre-application stage or once an application has been made, should be necessary, proportionate and clearly scoped to avoid unnecessary costs to applicants and public bodies. Similarly, it is important that the information subsequently submitted meets these criteria. So I can understand the appointed officers looked at this as a delegated case. They've got control over the eventual decision, so they haven't looked for any kind of contaminated land assessment. They haven't consulted the Council's contaminated land officer because it's not the determining issue in this case, in their view. However, if you are minded to grant planning permission, I think it's much safer to actually at this stage issue a procedure notice, seek the views of the Council's contaminated land officer, and then you've got the comfort of knowing that there isn't potentially going to be a problematic issue there before you proceed to make a final decision on the case.
So I mean, basically what you're saying is we defer this until such time as we've got information on the contaminated land moving forward, and then bring it back to a future meeting with that information.
I mean, I think, you know, my professional view is I think that would be the safest course of action you could take in this circumstance, and then you've got comfort that there isn't going to be, you know, for the sake of an additional month or two, or however long it would take to get that comfort from the Council's contaminated land officer, you could proceed safely knowing that there's no real peril to issuing an alternative decision. I'm not sure what the Council's solicitor would say to that, though. She's obviously got her own legal advice. But that's certainly my view on it.
Okay, thanks for that. Laura, have you got advice on that?
Chair, it would be perfectly competent for you to issue a procedure notice asking for further written information, as Robert has suggested.
Okay, thanks for that, Laura. Ian, I'm happy to move forward that way and ask for that information to make a decision going forward when it comes back to a future LRB. Would you be happy with that?
I would, Chair. I was going to propose that if we got to that stage, because going back to historically being part of Ecclefechan, it was Cook's Garage, John Cook's Garage in particular, so that was part of a garage. It was a working area for absolutely sure. And I think what Robert said, if I've picked him up correctly, is that procedural notice would be to our contaminated land officer first, and ultimately, depending on what comes back from them, we would possibly apply a condition look for a contaminated land report, which would then outline within that report how that would be contaminated as it goes forward, which would be fully suspensive. I'm more than happy with that, Chair. I think it's fair.
Okay, any other members wish to discuss, or are you happy with the discussion between myself and Ian Carruthers about how we take this forward?
Happy to proceed on that basis, Chair. Happy
Ian.
to proceed on that basis.
But thanks, Ian. Howie. Ian Blake, are you happy with that?
I am sorry, I just couldn't find my button. Yes, I'm quite happy with that. Can I just check? I assume it will come back to the same LRB members.
Yeah, I think that's the way that we do things. If we do sort of defer for that system, that comes back to the four of us that are in the discussion, and I'll just make sure that is the case. Claire, it is the case, isn't it? Yes,
that is indeed the case. Essentially, you would be agreeing to adjourn this meeting at this item to allow for the procedure of the written submission to seek advice from the contaminated land officer. Once that process has been completed, the meeting would be re-adjourned with reconvened with the same members present.
Okay, well, I'm happy to move that as a way forward. Are all members happy with that?
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Can you confirm what the decision of the LRB is at the moment? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Again, I can confirm that the LRB have agreed to further procedure of a written submission to seek advice from the Council's contaminated land officer on this application. That will obviously allow your future deliberations to be fully informed.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much, members. There is no any other business deemed urgent by myself. So in that case, thank you very much for your input, your challenges, your questions, and obviously your history of planning. And I'll see you at the next one. Thanks very much. We'll close the meeting.
Thanks, Chair.